He used ZYN every day. His younger sister bought the same brand from the same gas station, tried it for a week, and quit after 2 weeks. 3 months later, one of them was planning a weekend fishing trip. The other couldn't walk across his living room without his heart pounding like he was sprinting. The first time it happened, Dylan checked his smartwatch. 182 beats per minute. He was sitting perfectly still. The emergency room said it was probably anxiety. The second hospital blamed caffeine. The third doctor told him to get more sleep. They were all wrong. Because something inside Dylan's heart had begun firing when it wasn't supposed to. And every extra nicotine pouch made it worse. By the time doctors discovered what was happening, his own heartbeat had become too dangerous to trust. This is what happened inside Dylan's body.
This is hidden pathogens.
Dylan Hale and his younger sister, Tina, had a competition that neither of them could remember starting. Every Saturday morning, they stopped at the same convenience store in Charleston, South Carolina. The rules never changed. Dylan bought coffee. Tina bought iced tea. The loser had to pay. Somehow, Dylan almost always lost. Tina claimed it was because he couldn't do basic math before caffeine. Dylan claimed she cheated. Their cashier, Mr. Lewis, had watched the argument for nearly 4 years. He laughed every single Saturday. You two still keeping score? 83-68, Tina answered. I was winning until she started making up rules, Dylan said. Tina smiled. I call it adapting. They left the store laughing. That was just who they were. Dylan was now 24, an electrician who could repair almost anything. Friends joked that if the lights went out in Charleston, Dylan would somehow fix the entire city before lunchtime. Tina was now 22, finishing nursing school. Whenever Dylan got a cut or a burn at work, she was the first person he called. Not because he thought it was serious, because she always answered. Despite being adults, they still ate dinner together at least twice a week. They still argued over football. They still texted each other almost every day. Neither of them imagined that one ordinary stop at that convenience store would become the dividing line between their lives. It started with a small white can behind the register. New product, Mr. Lewis said. People are buying them like crazy. Dylan picked it up. No tobacco? Nope, just nicotine. Dylan had been trying to quit smoking for almost a year. He looked at Tina. What do you think? She shrugged. It's your lungs. Dylan laughed. My lungs already hate me. He bought a can. A week later, Tina bought one too. Not because she wanted nicotine, because she wanted to understand why everyone at school kept talking about them. She used 2 pouches, maybe 3, then she slid the can across the dinner table toward Dylan. You want the rest? You quitting already? I don't like how much I keep thinking about the next one. Dylan opened the can. I think you're overreacting. Tina looked him straight in the eyes. Maybe. But if something starts controlling me after 3 days, I don't want to find out what happens after 3 months. Dylan laughed. He thought she was being dramatic. He emptied her can, then bought another, and another. Before long, neither of them kept track anymore. Tina stopped noticing the cans. Dylan stopped noticing how often he reached for them. By the end of the 3rd month, one habit had quietly become part of his life, and somewhere inside his chest, something else had quietly become part of his heartbeat. 3 months later, Dylan didn't think about cigarettes anymore. He thought about one thing: whether he had enough ZYN left to get through the day. Every Saturday morning, he and Tina still stopped at Mr. Lewis's convenience store. The score was now tied, 86-86. Mr. Lewis grinned as Dylan walked in. I was wondering when I'd see you. He reached beneath the counter before Dylan even asked. A fresh can, Dylan laughed. You know me too well. I do. Mr. Lewis slid the can across the counter. But I also know you've been buying these a lot more often. Dylan shrugged. They're better than cigarettes. Maybe. Mr. Lewis looked at him for a second. But better doesn't always mean good. Dylan smiled. I'll survive. Tina didn't say anything. She noticed something else. Dylan never bought just one can anymore. He bought two, sometimes three. One stayed in his truck, one stayed in his toolbox, one stayed beside his bed. Without realizing it, Dylan had built his entire day around never running out. He used one while driving, another before climbing a ladder, another after lunch, another during the drive home. He stopped counting after 10, and strangely, he no longer felt anything from them. No buzz, no rush, just normal. He didn't realize that normal now required nicotine. Thursday morning. Dylan was wiring ceiling lights inside a new office building outside Charleston. Music played through a speaker. Someone was arguing about college football. It was an ordinary day, until it wasn't. He reached into his tool belt for a screwdriver. His hand froze. A single heartbeat slammed against his ribs. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, his chest felt like it contained a hummingbird trapped inside a glass jar. His smartwatch vibrated. He glanced down. Heart rate, 182. He frowned. That couldn't be right. He wasn't running. He wasn't lifting. He was standing still. Another vibration. 188. The room began to tilt. The screwdriver slipped from his fingers and crashed onto the concrete floor, 3 stories below. Everyone looked up. "You okay, Dylan?" He stopped talking because he couldn't catch his breath. His vision narrowed. The edges of the room turned gray. He grabbed the ladder with both hands, afraid that if he let go, he would fall. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, his heart slowed. 1 beat, then another. His breathing returned. His watch read 81. The entire episode had lasted less than a minute. His coworkers laughed nervously. "You trying to scare us?" Dylan forced a smile. "I think my watch glitched." He wanted to believe that. By dinner that evening, he'd almost convinced himself it had never happened. Tina hadn't. She noticed him checking his watch every few minutes. "You've been doing that all night." Dylan hesitated. "My heart did something weird today." "Weird how?" He turned the watch toward her. The highest heart rate was still there. 188 beats per minute. Tina stared at the screen. "You were working?" "I was standing still." She looked at him, then back at the watch. Finally, she asked the question that would follow them through every hospital corridor over the next 2 weeks. "Dylan, if your heart can do this while you're standing still, what happens the next time it doesn't stop?" Neither of them knew the answer, but somewhere inside Dylan's chest, his heart already did. Dylan woke up the next morning feeling completely normal. No racing heartbeat, no dizziness, no chest pain. He even laughed at himself for checking his smartwatch before getting out of bed. 72 beats per minute. "See?" he texted Tina. "Told you it was nothing," she replied almost immediately. "Just promise me you'll call your doctor if it happens again." Dylan sent back a thumbs up. Then he went to work. What Dylan didn't know was that his heart had never actually gone back to normal. Here's what happened inside his body. Every time Dylan placed a ZYN pouch beneath his lip, nicotine was absorbed through the lining of his mouth and entered his bloodstream within minutes. From there, it traveled to 2 places almost immediately: his brain and his heart. Inside his brain, nicotine triggered the release of adrenaline and other stress chemicals. Your body doesn't know the difference between escaping a fire and receiving a large dose of nicotine. To your nervous system, both can look like an emergency. Your brain responded by telling your heart to beat faster, beat harder, stay ready. Normally, that isn't dangerous. Your heart is designed to speed up when you exercise, when you're frightened, or when you're excited. Then it slows back down. Dylan's heart was different. Somewhere inside the lower chambers of his heart, a tiny cluster of electrical cells had become unusually excitable. Most people never know those cells even exist. Their job is simple. Wait. Let the heart's natural pacemakers stay in charge. But under the right conditions, those cells can begin firing on their own. When that happens, your heart suddenly has 2 conductors trying to lead the same orchestra. One says, "Beat here." The other says, "No, beat now." The electrical signals collide. Instead of one smooth rhythm, the heart begins racing out of control. Doctors call this an arrhythmia. But here's the part that terrified Dylan's cardiologist. The rhythm didn't stay abnormal. It corrected itself. The rogue cells stopped firing. The heart returned to normal. By the time Dylan looked at his smartwatch, the evidence was already disappearing. By the time he drove home, his heartbeat looked healthy again. By the next morning, even an electrocardiogram might have been completely normal. Tina kept thinking about the number on Dylan's watch, 188. Dylan kept thinking about work. Neither of them realized the same electrical mistake had already happened once, and hearts that do it once sometimes do it again. The second episode wouldn't happen at work. It would happen somewhere far more dangerous, where pulling over wouldn't be an option. The second episode happened 4 days later, exactly where Dylan hoped it never would. He was driving across the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge on his way home from work. Rush hour, 6 lanes of traffic. Concrete barriers on both sides. No shoulder, no place to pull over. His phone was connected to the truck speakers. Tina was in the middle of telling him about a patient she'd seen during clinicals. Then Dylan stopped talking. "Dylan?" Silence. "Dylan?" His breathing became loud, fast, uneven. The steering wheel suddenly felt slippery beneath his hands. His smartwatch vibrated once. Then again, he didn't have to look. He already knew. His heart was racing, harder than before. His vision blurred. The taillights ahead stretched into long red streaks. "Dylan, answer me. His voice cracked. "I think." The truck drifted toward the next lane. A horn exploded beside him. Dylan jerked the wheel back just in time. Another heartbeat slammed into his chest. Then another. Then another. He honestly thought this was how people died. Not with pain, not with warning. Just with a heartbeat that refused to slow down. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. His breathing steadied. The watch buzzed one last time. Heart rate, 84. Dylan drove the rest of the way home, without turning the radio back on. Tina was waiting in his driveway before he arrived. "You scared me." "I'm okay." "No." She pointed at his watch. "You're lucky." 20 minutes later, they were sitting inside an urgent care clinic. The physician listened carefully. "When did it start?" "About a week ago." "Chest pain?" "No." "Did you pass out?" "No." The doctor examined him. Blood pressure, normal. Oxygen, normal. Temperature, normal. Then came the electrocardiogram. Dylan watched the paper feed slowly out of the machine. The doctor studied it for less than 30 seconds. "It looks completely normal," Tina frowned, but his watch recorded almost 190 beats per minute. The physician nodded. "I'm not saying nothing happened. I'm saying whatever happened isn't happening now." He leaned back in his chair. "You're 24. You recently quit smoking. You've probably been drinking more caffeine to compensate. Stress can do this. So can anxiety." Dylan looked at Tina. He almost smiled. "See? Nothing serious." The doctor recommended less caffeine, more sleep, hydration, and avoiding unnecessary stress. Dylan left carrying reassurance instead of answers. Tina wasn't convinced. That night, she searched medical journals. She searched nursing textbooks. She searched everything she could think of. One sentence kept appearing over and over again. "A normal ECG does not rule out an intermittent arrhythmia." She read it 3 times. Then she looked toward Dylan's bedroom. He was asleep. His smartwatch sat charging on the kitchen counter. Neither of them realized that the only device that had ever captured Dylan's dangerous heartbeat was sitting beside the coffee maker. And in less than 72 hours, his heart would race again. This time, there would be people watching it happen. 2 mornings later, Dylan woke up feeling normal. That was the terrifying part. No chest pain, no dizziness, no warning. He almost forgot about the bridge. Almost. The smartwatch was back on his wrist. Tina had insisted. Just wear it for a few days. Dylan rolled his eyes. You sound like my doctor. Good? That wasn't a compliment, she smiled. Still wearing it. Dylan left for work. For 6 hours, nothing happened. His heart behaved perfectly. Normal rhythm, normal rate, normal life. Then, at 4:17 p.m., his smartwatch vibrated. Dylan looked down. At first, he thought it was another notification. Then he saw the number. Heart rate, 196. He stopped walking. The office around him continued moving. Phones ringing, people talking, printers running, but Dylan heard none of it. Because his heart wasn't beating faster. It was beating differently. The feeling was impossible to explain. Like his chest was trying to keep up with something his body couldn't control. He put a hand over his heart. The beats were uneven, fast, chaotic, wrong. A coworker noticed his face. Dylan? No answer. Dylan, are you okay? Dylan tried to respond, but his legs suddenly weakened. He grabbed the edge of a desk. The smartwatch vibrated again. Heart rate, 214. Tina's warning came back to him. If your heart can do this while you're standing still, what happens the next time it doesn't stop? This time, it wasn't stopping. Someone called 911. Dylan sat on the floor against the wall, trying to stay awake. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. The moment they attached the cardiac monitor, everything changed. One paramedic looked at the screen, then looked at Dylan, then looked back at the screen. How long has this been happening? Dylan swallowed. I don't know. The paramedic didn't answer, because now they knew. This wasn't anxiety, this wasn't stress, this wasn't just a fast heartbeat. The monitor showed a dangerous rhythm coming from the lower chambers of his heart, ventricular tachycardia, a rhythm that can prevent the heart from pumping blood effectively. The monitor continued flashing, 214 beats per minute. The paramedic reached for the radio. Patient is in ventricular tachycardia. The room suddenly became quiet, because everyone understood what that meant. The same heartbeat that had stopped on the bridge had returned, but this time, it didn't stop. Dylan watched the paramedics prepare equipment. Am I going to die? Nobody answered immediately, because the honest answer was the one nobody wanted to say. A heart rhythm like this can sometimes correct itself, and sometimes it doesn't. The ambulance doors closed, the siren turned on, and for the first time in Dylan Hale's life, his heart was no longer just beating too fast, it was fighting to keep him alive. The ambulance ride felt longer than it was. Dylan stared at the ceiling. Every few seconds, the monitor beside him screamed. A sharp electronic sound, then another. Every alarm meant the same thing. His heart was still trying to run away. The paramedic watched the screen. Stay with me, Dylan. I'm here. Good. Dylan swallowed. Am I having a heart attack? The paramedic looked at the monitor, then back at him. No, but your heart rhythm is serious. That answer scared him more, because Dylan understood heart attacks. Everyone did. But a heart rhythm problem? That sounded invisible. Something happening without anyone being able to stop it. When they reached the hospital, a team was already waiting. Within minutes, Dylan was surrounded by doctors. Blood tests, another ECG, chest imaging, questions. Lots of questions. Any family history of heart disease? No. Any previous heart problems? No. Any medications? No. Any drugs? No. The doctor looked at Tina. Anything he hasn't mentioned? Tina hesitated, then looked at Dylan. The nicotine pouches. Dylan looked away. The doctor turned back. How often? Dylan shrugged. I don't know. 10 a day? A long pause. Sometimes more. The room went quiet. But the doctor didn't immediately blame ZYN, because medicine doesn't work that way. A possible cause is not the same as proof. They needed answers. They needed to know what his heart was doing when nobody was watching. The cardiologist ordered continuous monitoring. A machine attached to Dylan's chest would record every heartbeat, every electrical signal, every abnormal moment. For the first few hours, Nothing happened. Normal rhythm, normal rate. Dylan almost started believing the nightmare was over. Then, at 2:13 a.m., the monitor alarm sounded. A nurse rushed in. Dylan woke up. What happened? Nobody answered immediately. The nurse stared at the screen, then called the cardiologist. Within minutes, the room filled again. The monitor showed the same dangerous rhythm, ventricular tachycardia, but this time, they captured it. They had proof. The cardiologist studied the tracing, then said something that made Tina's stomach drop. His heart isn't randomly speeding up. Dylan looked at him. What does that mean? The doctor zoomed in on the electrical pattern. It means something inside his heart is triggering it. Tina stepped closer. Can you fix it? The doctor didn't answer immediately, because before you fix a problem, you have to know what caused it. And Dylan's heart had just revealed something terrifying. This wasn't just a heart that was beating too fast. It was a heart that had developed its own dangerous electrical pathway. The question was, why? Dylan was 24 years old. No heart disease, no previous problems, no warning signs. Yet something inside his chest was acting like he was decades older. And the doctors were about to search for the one clue everyone else had missed, the clue hidden in the past 3 months. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by real medical mysteries like this, share this video and subscribe to this channel. If you value these videos, there's a free link in the description and pinned comment that helps support the channel. Every bit of click helps us continue researching and telling these stories, and it's completely free. Now, let's continue. For 2 days, Dylan's doctors looked at his heart. They studied the rhythm, they studied the electrical signals, they studied every test they could run, and every result gave them the same frustrating answer. Dylan had a dangerous arrhythmia, but they still didn't know why. His heart was structurally normal. The scans showed no major damage, no blocked arteries, no obvious heart disease. For a 24-year-old, that made no sense. The cardiology team started looking at the usual explanations: genetic conditions, hidden heart disorders, electrolyte problems, medications, illegal drugs, everything. Everything except one small detail: the timeline. Then, Dr. Sarah Mitchell walked into Dylan's room. She was an electrophysiologist, a heart rhythm specialist, the kind of doctor who didn't just look at the heartbeat. She looked at the pattern behind it. She reviewed Dylan's monitor recordings. Then she stopped. She rewound the strip, then watched it again. How old is he? 24. Any previous heart problems? No. Family history? Nothing significant. She looked back at the monitor. Something bothered her. Not what she saw, what she didn't see. A damaged heart, a weak heart, a dying heart. Dylan's heart looked normal between episodes. That was the strange part. She turned to the other doctors. When did this start? One doctor answered. About 3 months ago. Dr. Mitchell looked up. 3 months ago? Yes. Was anything different in his life at that time? The room became quiet. Because everyone had been asking the same questions. But nobody had asked that one. What changed? Tina stepped forward. He started using something. The doctor looked at her. What? She hesitated. Nicotine pouches. How much? Dylan looked down. A lot. How much is a lot? He swallowed. 10 a day. Sometimes more. Dr. Mitchell didn't immediately say it caused his condition. She didn't have enough evidence. But she had something more important. A direction. She opened Dylan's timeline. Before 3 months ago, no heart problems, no episodes, no symptoms. After 3 months of heavy nicotine use, first racing heartbeat. Second episode, third episode, dangerous ventricular rhythm. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Nicotine affects the nervous system, she explained. It increases adrenaline. It changes how your body responds to stress. But the question is whether it pushed an already vulnerable heart, or whether it created the vulnerability itself. That difference mattered, because if ZYN was only triggering the episodes, they had one problem. But if it had changed the way Dylan's heart's electrical system behaved, they had a much bigger one. Dylan looked at her. So, what happens now? Dr. Mitchell didn't answer immediately, because there was one more test she needed. A test that would show whether Dylan's heart was simply reacting or whether something inside it had permanently changed. She looked at the monitor one more time, then said the sentence Dylan would remember forever. I need to find out what your heart does when nobody is watching. And for the first time, the doctors weren't just treating Dylan's heartbeat. They were hunting the reason it lost control. The doctors had a name for what was happening: ventricular tachycardia. But a name was not an explanation. Dylan wanted to know one thing: how did this happen to me? Because that was the part nobody could explain. He was 24, he exercised, he worked. He had no history of heart problems, yet his heart was behaving like it had a hidden electrical fault. Dr. Mitchell sat beside his hospital bed. Your heart is not just a pump. She pointed to the monitor showing his heartbeat. It's an electrical system. Every beat begins with a signal. That signal travels through your heart in a precise order, like a city where every traffic light changes at exactly the right time. Dylan watched the screen. So what went wrong? Dr. Mitchell looked at the rhythm strip. Somewhere, those signals became unstable. Inside Dylan's body, something had changed. Every time he placed a ZYN pouch beneath his lip, nicotine entered his bloodstream. Within minutes, it reached his brain. His nervous system responded, not because nicotine was a poison like a snake bite, because nicotine was a chemical signal, a message, and that message told his body one thing: be ready. His heart began receiving more frequent commands from the stress system: release adrenaline, increase alertness. Speed up the heartbeat. For a healthy heart, that usually passes. The heart speeds up, then slows down. But Dylan's heart had crossed a dangerous line. The electrical cells in his ventricles had become more sensitive, easier to trigger, easier to disrupt. Like a microphone turned up too high, a small sound could suddenly create a deafening feedback loop. Inside his lower heart chambers, electrical signals began firing when they shouldn't. One extra signal became several. Several became hundreds. And suddenly, the heart was no longer following its normal rhythm. It was racing on its own. That was ventricular tachycardia, a storm inside the heart's electrical system. The terrifying part was that Dylan could feel completely normal between episodes. Because the problem wasn't that his heart was always broken. The problem was that something was waiting for the right trigger. A stressful day, a surge of adrenaline, a stimulant. Anything that pushed his nervous system too far. Tina sat beside his bed that night. She looked at the unopened ZYN can on the table. Do you think it was the pouches? Dylan stared at it. I don't know. That was the hardest answer. Because everyone wanted a simple explanation. A villain. A single moment. A clear mistake. But medicine rarely works that way. Sometimes something doesn't destroy your body immediately. Sometimes it changes the conditions inside your body and waits. For 3 months, Dylan thought ZYN was helping him escape cigarettes. He never realized his heart was slowly adapting to the same chemical he was putting into it every day. The doctors had found the rhythm. They had found the pattern. Now they had to answer the most important question. If nicotine helped create this problem, could Dylan's heart recover? Or had the damage already become permanent? Dylan thought finding the problem would make everything easier. It didn't. Because knowing what was happening inside his heart did not mean they knew how to stop it. The doctors had confirmed the rhythm. They had identified the danger. Now they had to answer the hardest question: what happens next? Dr. Mitchell sat with Dylan and Tina the following morning. The good news is, your heart muscle is not damaged. Dylan nodded. Then came the sentence that erased the relief. But the electrical problem is real. Tina looked at her. So what do you do? Dr. Mitchell opened Dylan's chart. There are a few options. The first was medication. Beta blockers. Drugs designed to slow the heart's response to adrenaline. They could reduce the chances of another episode. but they couldn't guarantee it would never happen again. The second option was an electrophysiology study. Doctors would map the electrical signals inside Dylan's heart, find where the abnormal rhythm was coming from, and if they found the source, they could try to destroy that tiny area. A procedure called catheter ablation. It sounded simple, it wasn't. Because the dangerous signal was hiding between normal heartbeats. Dylan's heart could look completely healthy 1 minute and become unstable the next. Then Dr. Mitchell explained the option that frightened Dylan the most, an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD, a small device placed beneath the skin, connected to wires inside the heart, a device that would watch every heartbeat, every second. And if Dylan's heart ever entered a deadly rhythm again, the device could deliver a shock to restart it. Dylan stared at her. "You mean a machine would have to be inside me?" Dr. Mitchell nodded. "Only if we decide the risk is high enough." That sentence stayed with him. Risk. A word he had never associated with himself. Dylan wasn't 50. He wasn't 70. He wasn't someone who had spent decades ignoring his health. He was 24 years old. A week earlier, his biggest problem was running out of ZYN before work. Now doctors were discussing putting a device inside his chest because his heart could suddenly stop protecting him. That night, Tina found him awake. The hospital room was dark. "You should sleep." "I don't know if I can." She sat beside him. "You scared me." Dylan looked down. "I'm sorry." "No." Tina shook her head. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like this is something you have to apologize for." Dylan didn't answer. Because the hardest part wasn't the fear of dying. It was realizing how quickly normal life could disappear. The next morning, the doctors made their decision. Dylan would stop using nicotine immediately. They started medication. They scheduled the electrical mapping procedure, and they placed a monitor on him that would record every rhythm his heart produced. But before Dylan left the hospital, Dr. Mitchell gave him one warning. The next few months are important. Your heart has shown us it can enter a dangerous rhythm. The question now is whether removing the trigger is enough, or whether the problem has already become part of your heart's electrical system. Dylan walked out of the hospital carrying a medication bag, a heart monitor, and a question he never imagined asking himself: could a heart that betrayed you once ever be trusted again? Dylan thought leaving the hospital would feel like freedom. It didn't. The first morning back home, he stood in his kitchen staring at the coffee maker. The same kitchen where his smartwatch had captured his first dangerous heartbeat. The same place where his life had quietly changed. Everything looked normal. That was the strangest part. The world had moved on, but Dylan hadn't. Before, he woke up and started his day. Now he woke up and checked his pulse. Before, a fast heartbeat during exercise meant he was getting stronger. Now it meant one question: is it happening again? Every sensation became suspicious. A skipped beat, a flutter, a sudden rush in his chest. Things most people ignored. Dylan couldn't, because he knew what could happen next. The first week, he followed every rule. No nicotine, no energy drinks, no unnecessary stress. He took his medication exactly on time. He wore the heart monitor. He did everything the doctors asked. But fear doesn't disappear just because you do everything right. One night, Dylan woke up suddenly. His heart was pounding. For 5 seconds, he froze. 5 seconds was all it took. His mind went back to the bridge, the office, the ambulance, the monitor showing 214 beats per minute. He grabbed his smartwatch. Heart rate, 11112. Normal. Not dangerous. But Dylan was already scared. Tina found him sitting on the edge of his bed. "You okay?" Dylan didn't answer immediately. Then he said something she wasn't expecting. "I don't know if I'm afraid of dying." Tina sat beside him. "I'm afraid of not knowing when it's happening." That was the part nobody could prepare him for. A heart rhythm problem is invisible. There is no wound, no cast, no scar someone can see. Dylan looked healthy, he sounded healthy, but every day he carried the knowledge that something inside his chest could suddenly change. 3 months earlier, Dylan couldn't imagine going one day without nicotine. Now he couldn't imagine going one day without thinking about his heart. Then came the appointment that changed everything. Dr. Mitchell reviewed Dylan's latest monitoring results. The good news: no major episodes, no sustained ventricular tachycardia. The medication appeared to be helping. Dylan smiled. "Does that mean I'm fixed?" Dr. Mitchell paused, and that pause told him everything. "Your heart is stable." "That's different from fixed." Dylan looked down. "What happens now?" She explained that the next months would determine his future. Some patients improve after removing triggers and treating the underlying problem. Others continue having episodes and need additional interventions. There was no instant answer, no single test that could tell Dylan exactly what his future would look like. His heart had become a waiting game. A month passed, then two. Dylan slowly started rebuilding his life. He went back to work. He started exercising again. At first, Tina walked with him every time, not because Dylan needed someone watching him, because she needed proof that he was okay. Then one evening, Dylan ran alone for the first time since the hospital. 1 mile, then 2. His heart sped up, but this time, it slowed down again. For the first time in months, a fast heartbeat didn't feel like an emergency. It felt normal. But just when Dylan started believing the worst was behind him, the doctors found something on his follow-up tests, something they had not seen before, a clue hidden inside his heart's electrical pattern, and it changed what they thought they knew about his condition. 6 months after Dylan Hale collapsed, his heart looked different. Not on the outside, not something anyone could see, but inside the rhythm recordings, the doctors saw something they had been hoping for: stability. No more episodes of sustained ventricular tachycardia. No emergency ambulance rides. No hospital alarms at 2 a.m. The dangerous rhythm that had taken over his life had not returned. Dylan was lucky, but lucky did not mean unchanged, because surviving something is not the same as going back to who you were before. Dylan never touched nicotine again, not once. The last ZYN can stayed in a drawer for months. Not because he wanted to keep it, because throwing it away felt like admitting how close he had come to losing everything. Eventually, Tina threw it away for him. "You don't need a reminder." Dylan watched it disappear. "You know what the strangest part is?" "What?" "I used to think quitting would be the hardest thing." Tina smiled. "And now?" Dylan looked at the empty drawer. "Now I know the hardest thing was realizing I wasn't invincible." He returned to work slowly. At first, he avoided anything that raised his heart rate. Running, heavy workouts, even climbing stairs too quickly. Every heartbeat felt like a question. Is this normal, or is this the beginning? But over time, something changed. Dylan started learning the difference between listening to his body and being controlled by fear. He started exercising again, short runs, then longer ones. Each time his heart sped up and slowed down normally, he gained something back. Not just fitness, trust. Tina noticed the difference. "You stopped checking your watch every 5 minutes." Dylan laughed. "I didn't notice." Exactly. For the first time in months, Dylan was living instead of monitoring. But there was one thing he never forgot. The doctors still could not say with absolute certainty that nicotine alone caused his arrhythmia. They could not point to one moment and say, "This is where everything changed." Medicine rarely gives perfect answers. What they knew was this: nicotine can stimulate the body's stress response. It can increase heart rate. It can trigger palpitations and abnormal rhythms in some people. And for Dylan, the timing was impossible to ignore. 3 months before, no episodes. No warning signs, no heart scares. 3 months after starting heavy nicotine use, a dangerous rhythm, a hospital bed, a life changed overnight. Dylan still thinks about that, not with anger, with perspective. Because the thing that almost destroyed his life did not look dangerous. It was small, white, easy to hide, something he could carry in his pocket, something he used every day without thinking twice. Today, Dylan keeps one thing from that time: His smartwatch. Not because he is afraid, because it reminds him. The device did not save him because it predicted the future. It saved him because it recorded the moment his body was trying to tell him something was wrong, and he finally listened. Tina still teases him sometimes. You know you were impossible before all this, right? Dylan smiles. Before? She laughs. Fair point. But then she gets serious. You scared me. Dylan nods. I know. And I never want to go through that again. Me neither. 6 months earlier, Dylan thought his heart had failed him. Now he understands something different. His heart was not trying to betray him. It was warning him. The question was whether he would listen. Because sometimes the scariest symptoms are not the ones that hurt, they are the ones that quietly ask for attention before it is too late. 3 months before Dylan Hale entered the hospital, he thought he had found the easier option. No cigarettes, no smoke. No lighter in his pocket, just a small white pouch, something he could use at work, something he could keep hidden, something that felt harmless. Every day, Dylan placed ZYN beneath his lip and moved on with his life. He did not feel like he was taking a risk. He felt like he was making a better choice. And that was the part he still thinks about. The most dangerous things are not always the things that look dangerous. Sometimes they look convenient. Sometimes they fit in your pocket. Sometimes they become part of your routine so slowly you stop questioning them. 3 months later, Dylan was lying on a hospital bed with wires attached to his chest, a monitor watching every beat of his heart, doctors trying to understand why a 24-year-old had developed a dangerous rhythm. His sister Tina was sitting beside him, the same person who first noticed something was wrong. The same person who kept asking questions when Dylan wanted to ignore the warning signs. Because that was the difference. Dylan's heart had been sending signals, a racing heartbeat, the strange episodes, the moments that felt impossible to explain. But he kept moving, he kept working, he kept telling himself it would pass, until one day, it didn't. The lesson was not that one pouch destroyed his heart overnight. The human body is more complicated than that. Doctors could not prove nicotine was the only reason Dylan developed his arrhythmia, but they knew something important. Nicotine affects the cardiovascular system. It can increase the body's stress response. It can raise heart rate. It can trigger symptoms in people who are vulnerable. And Dylan's timeline was impossible to ignore. Before, no episodes, no hospital visits, no fear. After months of heavy nicotine use, a dangerous rhythm, an ambulance, a life changed. Today, Dylan still carries the memory of that day. Not because he wants to live afraid, because he never wants to ignore his body again. He still exercises. He still works. He still laughs with Tina. But there is one thing he does differently. When something feels wrong, he pays attention. Because the body does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. These stories take a lot of research to put together. If you'd like to support the channel, you'll find a free link in the description and pinned comment. Checking it out helps support future videos, and every click allows us to keep bringing these cases to the channel. Also, it's completely free. If you learned something from this case, like, share, and subscribe for more real medical stories. And if you chose not to subscribe, leave a comment and tell me what would make these videos better. I read far more comments than you might think. This is Hidden Pathogens. I'll see you in the next video. Good night.